They laughed at Britain's inferior fighters until the Spitfire broke the Luftwaffe, September 3, 1940, The Hague, Netherlands. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring stood before his air fleet commanders with the confidence of a man who had conquered Europe. Outside the conference room, Luftwaffe fighters and bombers stretched across captured airfields from Norway to France. Inside, Göring's question hung in the air like smoke. What do you need to finish off the RAF? The German commanders exchanged glances. They had just spent 2 months hammering British airfields. They had shot down hundreds of RAF fighters. They had numerical superiority, better trained pilots, more combat experience. But somehow, impossibly, the RAF kept coming. Gruppenkommandeur Adolf Galland, already an ace with dozens of victories, gave an answer that would echo through aviation history. I should like an outfit of Spitfires for my Jagdgeschwader. The room fell silent. Göring's face turned crimson. This was not the answer he expected, but it was the truth that would define the summer of 1940. May 10, 1940. 3 months earlier, the German war machine had been unstoppable. Fall Gelb, the invasion of France and the Low Countries, commenced at dawn. Wehrmacht panzers rolled through the Ardennes. Luftwaffe bombers struck Allied airfields. Paratroopers seized key bridges and fortifications. The Western Allies collapsed in weeks. The British Expeditionary Force retreated to Dunkirk, abandoning equipment, tanks, artillery. By June 22, France had surrendered. Continental Europe belonged to the Third Reich. And standing alone across the English Channel was Britain. An island nation, isolated, outnumbered, apparently doomed. Oberst Werner Mulders, the Luftwaffe's top-scoring ace at the time, flew reconnaissance missions over southern England in early July 1940. He reported back to his superiors with clinical precision. The RAF has perhaps 600 operational fighters. We have 2,600 aircraft available for the campaign. Our pilots are veterans of Poland, Norway, France. Theirs are defenders with limited combat experience. The mathematics are simple. We will achieve air superiority within 2 weeks. Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, can proceed by mid-August. Every senior Luftwaffe officer agreed. This would be quick, brutal, decisive. They had seen RAF fighters over Dunkirk, Hawker Hurricanes, sturdy but slow, and Supermarine Spitfires, faster, more elegant, but surely no match for the Messerschmitt Bf 109. The German pilots had confidence bordering on arrogance. They had earned it. In Spain, they had refined their tactics. In Poland, they had perfected the blitzkrieg. In France, they had demonstrated total air superiority. Britain would be no different. July 10, 1940, the Battle of Britain officially began. Phase 1, Kanalkampf, the Channel Fight. Luftwaffe bombers and fighters attacked British shipping convoys in the English Channel. The goal was threefold. First, destroy British merchant shipping. Second, draw out RAF fighters and destroy them in combat. Third, test British defences and measure response times. Hauptmann Helmut Wick led his Jagdgeschwader II squadron on the early raids. He was 25 years old, already a seasoned combat pilot with multiple victories. His first encounter with Spitfires came on July 19, 1940. His combat report, filed that evening, was dismissive. Engaged formation of 6 Spitfires at 15,000 feet over Portland. Aircraft appeared similar to our Bf 109 in performance, perhaps slightly more maneuverable in turns. Shot down one, damaged another. No difficulty maintaining tactical advantage. Assessment: RAF fighters pose manageable threat with proper tactics. This assessment was shared across Luftwaffe squadrons. The Spitfire was good, but the Bf 109 was better. and German pilots were superior. The mathematics remained simple, but what the German pilots didn't know was that they were fighting the wrong battle. While Luftwaffe commanders focused on destroying RAF fighters in the air, the British had built something revolutionary, not a better aircraft, a better system. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding commanded RAF Fighter Command with a defensive strategy that seemed almost cowardly to aggressive German fighter pilots. He refused to commit his entire force. He kept reserves, he rotated squadrons, he used radar. The British had been developing radar technology since 1935. By 1940, a chain of radar stations stretched along Britain's southern and eastern coasts. Chain home stations could detect aircraft formations at ranges exceeding 100 miles. Chain home low stations covered low-altitude approaches. The information flowed to Fighter Command headquarters at Bentley Priory. From there, sector controllers directed squadrons to precise interception points. German pilots found this baffling. They would cross the channel at dawn, expecting surprise. Instead, Spitfires would be climbing to meet them, perfectly positioned. They would vary their approach routes, altitudes, timings. Still, British fighters appeared exactly where needed. Oberst Theo Osterkamp, commander of Jagdfliegerführer II, tried to understand the British capability. His intelligence reports from late July 1940 grasped at explanations. The British appear to have an exceptional observation network. They detect our formations while still over France. Coastal observers, perhaps, or spies reporting our takeoffs. Whatever the method, we cannot achieve tactical surprise. Recommendation: larger formations to overwhelm response capability. The recommendation was implemented. German formations grew from dozens to hundreds of aircraft. The result was exactly what Dowding wanted. Larger formations were easier to detect, took longer to assemble, were less maneuverable, and presented better targets for mass interception. The Spitfire squadrons developed tactics specifically for these large raids. Flight Lieutenant Sailor Mallon, commanding 74 Squadron, pioneered the head-on attack. Instead of chasing German formations from behind, his Spitfires would climb to high altitude ahead of the bombers, then dive directly through the formation from the front. The psychological impact on German bomber crews was devastating. They were trained to defend against fighters attacking from behind and below. Defending against fighters diving through the formation at 400 Meter from head-on was nearly impossible. Mallon's combat reports from August 1940 documented the effectiveness. Head-on attack initiated at 20,000 feet against formation of 30 Heinkel, He-100M bombers, speed approximately 350 mph in dive, opened fire at 600 yards. Bomber formation broke immediately. 3 bombers observed smoking and descending. Own aircraft undamaged. Bomber defensive fire ineffective due to approach angle and speed. German bomber crews began reporting Spitfire terror attacks. The term appeared in multiple Luftwaffe unit diaries from August and September 1940. Bomber pilots described seeing Spitfires diving at them head-on. The split second to decide, hold course and fire, or break formation and evade. Either choice was bad. Hold course and the Spitfire's 8 machine guns would tear through the bomber's nose. Break formation and the bomber became isolated, vulnerable to follow-up attacks. German bomber losses climbed, 20 aircraft per day in early August, 30 per day by mid-August, 40 per day during the heaviest raids. These were unsustainable losses. German bomber production in 1940 averaged 300 aircraft per month across all types. At 40 losses per day, the entire bomber force would be destroyed in weeks. The British chain-home radar network could detect incoming raids 100 miles away. Ground observers tracked aircraft movements. Fighter controllers directed squadrons to intercept specific threats. German pilots found themselves consistently intercepted, consistently outnumbered at the point of contact, despite overall German numerical superiority, and consistently fighting over British territory, where shot-down RAF pilots could return to duty. Shot-down German pilots became prisoners. Lieutenant Franz von Vera, a Bf 109 pilot with 9 victories, wrote in his diary on August 1, 1940, "We expected to find the British demoralized. Instead, they fight with unexpected ferocity. Their pilots are skilled, their aircraft capable. Most troubling, they always seem to know we're coming. We cross the channel expecting surprise. We find Spitfires and Hurricanes waiting at altitude. This should not be possible. There is something we're missing." What von Werer was missing was that Britain wasn't fighting with aircraft alone. Britain was fighting with information, and the Spitfire was the perfect weapon to exploit that information. August 13, 1940, Adlertag, Eagle Day. Goering launched the main assault. The objective: destroy RAF Fighter Command in 4 days. 1,300 aircraft, bombers, dive bombers, fighters swept across the channel in massive formations. Target: RAF airfields, radar stations, aircraft factories. The Luftwaffe flew 1,485 sorties. They shot down 13 RAF fighters. They lost 45 aircraft. The mathematics were no longer simple. Oberst Werner Mulders, despite his earlier confidence, revised his assessment after flying 3 missions on August 13th. His after-action report was less optimistic. The Spitfire is a formidable opponent. In turning combat, it has advantages. Its tighter turning radius allows skilled pilots to gain firing position. Our Bf 109 strengths lie in dive and climb performance. But British pilots refuse to fight on our terms. They engage at altitude, force turning combat, then disengage using superior maneuverability. Recommendation: avoid prolonged dogfights with Spitfires. Use altitude advantage, attack with speed. Disengage before they can turn the tables. But Goering's orders left no room for tactical caution. Bombers required close escort. Close escort meant flying at bomber speed and altitude. Flying at bomber speed meant sacrificing the Bf 109's performance advantages. And flying as bomber escorts meant German fighters were meeting Spitfires on British terms. August 15, 1940, the largest Luftwaffe operation of the battle. Luftflotte 5, based in Norway, launched raids on northern England. They expected minimal resistance. Intelligence suggested most RAF fighters were concentrated in the south. They were wrong. Spitfires from 72 Squadron intercepted the raid over the North Sea. Flight Lieutenant Ted Graham led his section into a formation of Heinkel, He 111 bombers, escorted by Bf 110 heavy fighters. The combat lasted 12 minutes, 8 German bombers shot down, 7 Bf 110s destroyed, 1 Spitfire damaged, pilot unharmed. Luftflotte 5 never attempted another daylight raid on northern England. Meanwhile, in the south, the heaviest fighting of the battle unfolded. Over 500 German aircraft crossed the Channel in 3 separate waves. RAF Fighter Command scrambled every available squadron. Spitfires and Hurricanes met the raids over Kent, Sussex, Hampshire. The sky filled with contrails, tracer fire, smoke. By day's end, the Luftwaffe had lost 75 aircraft. RAF Fighter Command lost 34. The kill ratio was shifting, and German pilots were noticing. Unteroffizier Hans Eckhard Bob flew his Bf 109 on bomber escort missions through August 1940. He was 19 years old. He would survive the war as one of Germany's highest-scoring aces. But in August 1940, he was learning lessons that would haunt him. His logbook entries, recovered after the war, show the evolution of German respect for the Spitfire. August 16, 1940. Engaged Spitfires over Maidstone, fast maneuverable aircraft, difficult to keep in gun sight during turning combat. Shot down one, but lost wingman to another that I never saw. August 18, 1940. Bomber escort to Kenley Airfield, intercepted by Spitfires before reaching target. Formation broken up, lost 2 aircraft from my staffel. British pilots show excellent tactical coordination. They separate us from the bombers, then engage. August 25, 1940. Third mission today, exhausted. Every mission we face Spitfires. Every mission we lose aircraft. The British seem to have unlimited numbers. How is this possible? We were told we had destroyed most of their fighters. The answer was British aircraft production. In August 1940, British factories produced 476 new fighters. German factories produced 220 Bf-109s. Lord Beaverbrook's Ministry of Aircraft Production had achieved what German intelligence said was impossible. Britain was replacing losses faster than Germany could inflict them, and the civilian repair units were salvaging and repairing damaged Spitfires and Hurricanes at astonishing rates. Aircraft written off as destroyed were flying again within weeks. German aircraft shot down over Britain were total losses. British aircraft shot down over Britain were often salvageable. The mathematics were working against Germany. But the Spitfire's real advantage wasn't just production numbers. It was what happened when a skilled pilot climbed into the cockpit. The aircraft was designed by R.J. Mitchell, who had died of cancer in 1937 before seeing his creation achieve legendary status. Mitchell had designed a series of racing seaplanes for the Schneider Trophy races in the 1920s and early 1930s. The Supermarine S-6B had won the trophy permanently for Britain in 1931. It had set a world speed record of 407 mph. Mitchell understood speed, aerodynamics, efficiency. When the Air Ministry issued Specification F-730 for a new fighter in 1934, Mitchell applied everything he'd learned from racing. The result was the Type 300, later named Spitfire. The name was supposedly suggested by the chairman of Vickers Supermarine. Mitchell reportedly hated it, calling it bloody silly. But the name stuck, and it became legendary. The Spitfire's elliptical wing was not just beautiful, it was functionally optimal. The elliptical shape provided the most efficient lift distribution. It minimized induced drag. It allowed the wing to be thinner than conventional designs, while maintaining structural strength. This thin wing gave the Spitfire its speed advantage. Less drag meant more speed from the same engine power. The wing also housed the aircraft's armament, 8 303 Browning machine guns. 4 in each wing. Each gun had 300 rounds of ammunition. Total firing time, approximately 14 seconds. The guns were harmonized, adjusted so their fire converged at a specific distance. Initially 400 yards, combat experience showed this was too far. By August 1940, armorers were harmonizing at 250 yards. At this range, all 8 guns' fire converged in a lethal cone approximately 6 feet across. German pilots who survived Spitfire attacks described this convergence zone. Lieutenant Gustav Rödel, a Bf-109 pilot who would later score 97 victories, described his first encounter. August 11, 1940, over Portsmouth. I was in a slight dive, pursuing a hurricane. Suddenly my aircraft shuddered. I thought flak. Then I saw tracer passing on both sides. A Spitfire had somehow gotten above and behind me. I pulled hard left, but the Spitfire stayed with me. More hits. My cockpit filled with smoke, coolant temperature rising. I pushed into a steep dive toward France. The Spitfire followed for perhaps 20 seconds, then broke off. Later inspection showed 17 bullet holes in my aircraft, tail, wings, fuselage. 3 hit my armor plate behind the seat. Without that armor, I would be dead. The Spitfire's firepower is concentrated, devastating. If he gets into firing position, you have perhaps 2 seconds to evade before critical damage. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine was the other key to Spitfire performance. In the Mark I variant, it produced 1,030 horsepower, a 27-litre V12, liquid-cooled, 2-stage supercharger for high-altitude performance. But the Merlin had a critical weakness that German pilots exploited. It used a float carburetor. Under negative G-forces, such as a sudden dive, the fuel would float away from the intake. The engine would cut out for several seconds. German Bf-109s used fuel injection. They could dive without engine interruption. This gave them a tactical advantage. If a Spitfire pursued a Bf-109, the German could push into a negative G dive. The Spitfire pilot had to half roll and pull, losing time and distance. By the time the Spitfire completed the maneuver, the Bf-109 had often escaped. British engineers worked frantically to solve this problem. The solution, Miss Schilling's orifice, named after RA engineer Beatrice Schilling. A metal disc with a small hole installed in the fuel line. It restricted fuel flow just enough to prevent starvation under negative G. Simple, crude, effective. By early 1941, most Spitfires had the modification. But during the Battle of Britain, the carburetor limitation remained. Experienced Spitfire pilots learned to work around it. Don't chase a diving Bf-109. Force him into a turning fight instead. Use altitude and position, not speed. Let him dive away. You've accomplished the mission by driving him off the bombers. The Spitfire's control harmony was exceptional. Elevator, aileron, and rudder forces were perfectly balanced. Pilots could fly with fingertip pressure on the control column. This made the aircraft responsive, precise, less tiring on long missions. German pilots who tested captured Spitfires commented on this. Hauptmann Hans Eckhard Bob, who flew both Bf-109s and captured Spitfires, wrote in his diary, "The Spitfire is a gentleman's aircraft, light controls, responsive, forgiving. The 109 is a racehorse, fast, powerful, but demanding. It requires constant attention. The Spitfire you can fly almost casually. This gives British pilots an advantage in sustained combat. They tire less quickly. They can focus more on tactics, less on aircraft control. The cockpit layout was logical, efficient. Throttle on the left, spade grip control column in the center. Gun button on top of the grip, a simple thumb press to fire. The gun sight was a reflector type, a circle with a center dot, projected onto an angled glass plate. Simple but effective. Put the dot on the target, account for deflection, fire. The canopy gave excellent visibility, curved glass, minimal framing. Unlike the Bf-109's heavily framed canopy, Spitfire pilots could see in almost all directions. This prevented surprise attacks. British pilots developed a mantra, "Beware the Hun in the sun." But the Spitfire's canopy design meant you could check above and behind regularly. German pilots found it difficult to achieve surprise against alert Spitfire pilots. The landing gear was less satisfactory, narrow track, retracted outward into the wings. This made ground handling tricky. Takeoff and landing accidents were common, especially with inexperienced pilots. The Bf-109 had similar problems. Its narrow gear made it prone to ground loops. Both aircraft sacrificed ground handling for aerodynamic performance. But in the air, the Spitfire's performance justified the trade-offs. Maximum speed at altitude, 355 mph for the Mark I, rate of climb, 2,530 feet per minute, service ceiling, 34,000 feet, range, 395 miles. These numbers were competitive with the Bf-109E. But numbers alone didn't tell the story. The Spitfire's real advantage was how it combined these capabilities. It could climb quickly to altitude, critical for interception. German pilots who survived Spitfire attacks reported the same thing. The British fighters would maneuver into position with frustrating ease. Then a storm of tracer fire would rip through the Bf-109's thinner armor. Cooling systems ruptured, control surfaces shredded, engines seized, and the long flight back across the Channel became a desperate race against mechanical failure. Squadron leader Robert Stanford Tuck flew Spitfires with 92 Squadron. He shot down 29 enemy aircraft during the Battle of Britain. His tactical reports, filed with Fighter Command, showed how British pilots exploited the Spitfire's advantages. The Bf-109 is faster in a dive and has better climb rate at altitude, but in a turning fight, the Spitfire is superior. Our tactic, engage at high speed, force the German into a turning dogfight, maintain the turn until we can get guns on target. The German pilot has two choices: continue turning and give us a shot, or attempt to disengage. If he continues turning, we win. If he disengages, we've driven him away from the bombers. Mission accomplished. This tactical doctrine frustrated German bomber crews. They were taking mounting casualties. Their fighter escorts were being drawn away by aggressive Spitfire attacks, and RAF tactics were evolving faster than Luftwaffe commanders could adapt. September 7, 1940. Göring made his greatest mistake. Frustrated by the inability to destroy RAF Fighter Command, he shifted strategy. The new target, London. The German bomber streams turned away from RAF airfields and headed for the British capital. It seemed like a brilliant move. Force the RAF to defend London, destroy British morale, break the will to fight. Instead, it gave RAF Fighter Command exactly what it needed. Time to repair battered airfields, time to reorganize, time to rebuild, and permission to fight the battle on British terms. Hauptmann Gerhard Schöpfel led his Bf-109 Squadron on the first London raid. His combat report, filed September 7, 1940, showed the shock of what happened. We expected overwhelming success. We found hell. Spitfires and Hurricanes attacked in numbers we hadn't seen before. They came from multiple directions, multiple altitudes. Our formation was broken up before reaching central London. We shot down several British fighters, but we lost 11 bombers and 4 fighters. The British are not beaten. They are getting stronger. The London Blitz would continue for months, but the daylight attacks, the ones requiring fighter escort, were becoming unsustainable. The Luftwaffe was losing aircraft faster than factories could replace them. Experienced pilots were being killed or captured, and the Spitfires kept coming. September 15, 1940. What would later be recognized as the decisive day of the Battle of Britain. The date would become an RAF holiday, Battle of Britain Day. The Luftwaffe launched 2 massive raids on London. The first wave came at midday, 100 bombers, 400 fighters. Oberst Johannes Fink led the bomber formation. He was confident. German intelligence reported the RAF was down to perhaps 100 operational fighters. One more major raid should finish them. At RAF Fighter Command headquarters, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park watched the raid plots appear on the operations table. Dozens of markers showing German formations assembling over France. He issued orders, scramble everything. 23 squadrons received the call, every available Spitfire and Hurricane. Every pilot, including reserves and instructors. This was the maximum effort. Every fighter Britain could put into the air. Squadron leader Douglas Bader led the Duxford Wing. 5 squadrons, 60 aircraft. 3 Hurricane squadrons, 2 Spitfire squadrons. They climbed to 20,000 feet over London. Bader's tactical report, filed that evening, captured the moment of contact. We spotted the German formation at 12:15 hours, approximately 100 Dornier and Heinkel bombers in stepped formations, perhaps 200 Bf 109 fighters above them. The largest formation I have ever seen. I ordered the Hurricane squadrons to attack the bombers, Spitfire squadrons to engage the fighters. The combat that followed was the most intense of my career. Pilot Officer Bob Doe, flying a Spitfire with 234 Squadron, described the same engagement. The sky was full of aircraft, more than I'd seen in any previous raid. We dove through the fighters to get at the bombers. I fired at a Dornier, saw strikes on the engine. Then a Bf 109 was on my tail. I pulled hard right, felt the Spitfire tighten into the turn. The 109 couldn't follow. I reversed, got on his tail, fired. He rolled away trailing smoke. No time to confirm. Another bomber ahead. The combat lasted perhaps 10 minutes. Then suddenly the sky was empty except for falling aircraft and parachutes. The German formation never reached central London. It was broken up over the southern outskirts. Bombers scattered, jettisoning their loads early. Fighters engaged in desperate dogfights just to protect the retreat. But the day wasn't over. At 1400 hours, radar detected the second raid forming. Another massive formation, 150 bombers, 300 fighters. Park scrambled 17 squadrons. Many of the same pilots who had fought in the morning were back in the air. Flight Lieutenant Brian Lane, 19 Squadron, flew his second mission of the day. His combat report described exhaustion and determination. Took off at 14:23 hours. This was my third mission in 6 hours. Exhausted but determined. Climbed to 18,000 feet over Maidstone. Spotted German formation approaching from the southeast. Engaged Bf 109s above the bombers. Shot down one confirmed. My aircraft took hits from another. Glycol leak, smoke in cockpit. Made emergency landing at Hawking. Aircraft written off. I was back in a replacement Spitfire within 2 hours. The intensity of September 15th operations was unprecedented. RAF Fighter Command flew 1,000 sorties. Spitfires and Hurricanes met every raid. Pilots landed, refueled, rearmed, and took off again within minutes. Ground crews worked miracles. Armourers reloaded guns in record time. Fitters repaired battle damage between missions. Petrol Bowsers raced between aircraft. At forward airfields like Hornchurch and Kenley, aircraft were turning around in under 10 minutes. German bomber crews, returning to France, reported in disbelief. We were told the RAF was finished. We found more fighters than ever before. They attacked from all directions. They were aggressive, coordinated, relentless. Where did they come from? The answer was Dowding's rotation system. While southern squadrons bore the brunt of combat, northern squadrons rested and rebuilt. Fresh squadrons rotated south. Depleted squadrons rotated north. The system meant the RAF always had rested pilots available. German pilots, by contrast, flew from the same bases continuously. No rotation, no rest. Just mission after mission against an enemy that never seemed to diminish. By evening September 15th, the Luftwaffe's losses were catastrophic. 56 aircraft destroyed. Another 30 damaged beyond immediate repair, over 200 aircrew killed, wounded, or captured. RAF Fighter Command lost 28 aircraft. 13 pilots killed. But critically, the RAF's operational capability remained intact. Goering's plan to destroy Fighter Command in a single day had failed utterly. The psychological impact on German bomber crews was profound. Unteroffizier Wilhelm Raab, a Heinkel He 111 radio operator, wrote in his diary, September 15, 1940, "Today we learned the truth. The RAF is not defeated, perhaps cannot be defeated. We were told they had no fighters left." We counted over 100 attacking our formation. They came from every direction, above, below, head-on attacks. Our formation was shattered. We jettisoned bombs early, fled for the channel. Fighters pursued us to the coast. 3 aircraft from our Staffel did not return. We landed with 200 bullet holes in our aircraft. 1 engine destroyed, rudder damaged. How many more missions can we survive? The answer, for many German bomber crews, was not many more. Luftwaffe bomber units were being bled white. Experienced crews were being killed faster than replacements could be trained. Aircraft were being destroyed faster than factories could produce them. And the strategic objective, air superiority over southern England, was no closer. German fighter pilots faced their own crisis of confidence. They had been told to protect the bombers. But how? British fighters attacked from every angle. The Bf-109's range limitation meant only 10–15 minutes over target before fuel concerns forced return. The Spitfires, operating from bases minutes away, could stay and fight. Major Hannes Troutloft, commanding JG-54, wrote in his unit diary after September 15th, "We have lost the initiative. The British choose when and where to engage. We must fly escort missions at disadvantageous altitudes and speeds. Our aircraft strengths cannot be utilized under these conditions. The Spitfire, optimized for this exact mission, defeats us not through superiority, but through optimal employment. Current tactics are unsustainable. Recommend strategic reassessment." Hitler's strategic reassessment came October 12th. Operation Sea Lion postponed indefinitely. The invasion of Britain was off. But more importantly, the psychological impact was devastating to German morale. Oberleutnant Julius Neumann, a Bf-109 pilot with 21 victories, was shot down on September 15th. He survived, spent the rest of the war as a prisoner. In post-war interviews, he described the moment he realized Germany had lost the Battle of Britain. "We were told the RAF was finished. We were told they had perhaps 50 fighters left. On September 15th, I counted over 100 Spitfires and Hurricanes attacking our formation. Where did they come from? How did Britain produce so many aircraft? How did they train so many pilots? We had been lied to. The British were not defeated. They were winning." The statistics told the story that German propaganda tried to hide. Between July 10th and October 31st, 1940, the Luftwaffe lost 1,887 aircraft. RAF Fighter Command lost 1,023 aircraft, but British factories produced 1,900 new fighters during that period. German factories produced 775 Bf-109s. The Luftwaffe lost 2,662 aircrew, killed, wounded, or captured. RAF Fighter Command lost 544 pilots killed. And while German losses were permanent, the British could replace theirs. 19-year-old Polish pilot Witold Urbanowicz flew Spitfires with 303 Squadron, the highest-scoring RAF unit during the battle. He shot down 15 German aircraft in September 1940 alone. His assessment, recorded in squadron records, captured the turning point. The Germans came expecting easy victory. They found determined resistance. Their tactics were rigid. They flew straight lines to targets, straight lines home. We learned to exploit this, hit them on the way in, break up formations. Hit them again over target, chase them back to the channel. By September, German bomber crews were terrified. You could see it in how they flew, tight formations, defensive flying, desperate to reach the channel. The Spitfire had become the symbol of British defiance, and the Germans knew it. October 12, 1940, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion of Britain was cancelled. The Luftwaffe had failed to achieve air superiority. German losses were unsustainable, and the RAF, specifically the Spitfire and Hurricane pilots of Fighter Command, had accomplished what no other military force had achieved. They had stopped the German war machine. Goering blamed his commanders. He blamed German aircraft production. He blamed everything except the truth. The Spitfire, combined with radar, skilled pilots, and brilliant defensive tactics, had been too much. Hauptmann Adolf Galland, the pilot who had sarcastically asked Goering for Spitfires in September, would later explain his comment in post-war writings. "I was not saying the Spitfire was superior to the Bf-109. I was saying that our tactics, bomber escort at slow speed, negated our advantages. The Spitfire was optimized for the exact mission the British needed: short-range, high-performance interception. It could climb quickly to altitude. It could turn aggressively in combat. It could land, refuel, rearm, and return to combat in minutes. The Bf-109 was designed for different missions. But we were forced to fight on British terms, and on British terms, the Spitfire was the perfect weapon." But Galland's nuanced assessment came years after the battle. During the battle itself, German pilots developed a simpler understanding. Spitfires meant trouble. Avoid them if possible. If engagement was unavoidable, use altitude and speed advantages. Never get into a turning fight. Never underestimate British pilots. Werner Mulders, who had dismissed the Spitfire in July, revised his opinion dramatically by October. After the war, his combat reports were analyzed by aviation historians. The evolution was clear. July 1940, Spitfire performance approaching that of Bf-109, not a significant threat with proper tactics. August 1940. Spitfire is more maneuverable than previously assessed. Recommend caution in turning combat. September 1940. The Spitfire is a formidable opponent. British pilots use aircraft to maximum advantage. Our losses are mounting. Current tactics are unsustainable. October 1940. We cannot win air superiority over Britain with current resources. The RAF has proven more resilient than expected. The Spitfire in particular has exceeded all performance estimates. Recommend strategic reassessment. Hitler's strategic reassessment was to look east, to the Soviet Union, where he believed easy victories awaited. Britain, defended by its Spitfires, would remain undefeated. The production numbers told a story of British industrial determination. From 1936 to 1948, Britain produced 20,334 Spitfires of all variants, more than any other British combat aircraft. The aircraft evolved continuously. Mark III, 130 horsepower, 355 Mach 8 machine guns. Mark V, 1,470 horsepower, 374 fire, 2 cannons and 4 machine guns. Mark IX, 1,565 horsepower, 408 Mach, superior altitude performance. Mark XIII, 2,050 horsepower Griffon engine, 448 mph, one of the fastest piston aircraft ever built. Each variant maintained the fundamental advantages that made the Spitfire so effective: maneuverability, responsiveness, the ability to turn inside enemy aircraft, and that distinctive elliptical wing that became the symbol of British resistance. But the human cost told another story. RAF Fighter Command lost 544 pilots during the Battle of Britain. They came from Britain, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Belgium, France. They were career officers and weekend volunteers. They were teenagers and veterans. The oldest was 36. The youngest was 18. They flew Spitfires and Hurricanes against numerical superiority. They fought 3, 4, 5 missions per day. They landed with aircraft shot to pieces. They watched friends die in burning cockpits. And they kept flying, because surrender was not an option. Pilot Officer Geoffrey Wellham was 19 when he joined 92 Squadron in August 1940. He flew Spitfires throughout the battle. His memoir, written decades later, captured what German pilots faced. They came over in massive formations, hundreds of aircraft, expecting to overwhelm us. But we kept coming, kept intercepting, kept fighting. The Spitfire gave us confidence. We knew if we could get into position, if we could force a turning fight, we had the advantage. The Germans were skilled. Their aircraft were good, but we were fighting for our homes, our families, our country. And the Spitfire was the tool that let us turn desperation into victory. The final statistics from the Battle of Britain were sobering. 529 enemy aircraft shot down by Spitfires, 230 Spitfires lost in combat. Kill ratio 2.3 to 1. But the real measure of success wasn't the kill ratio. It was that Britain survived, that the invasion never came, that Germany's first major defeat came at the hands of RAF Fighter Command, and that the Spitfire, dismissed by German commanders in July as a manageable threat, became the symbol of that defeat. Hermann Göring never forgave his fighter commanders for the failure over Britain. He blamed them for not being aggressive enough, for not protecting the bombers, for not achieving the impossible. Adolf Galland, who rose to command the entire Luftwaffe fighter force, would later write the definitive German assessment. We were asked to do what could not be done. Escort bombers at slow speed, low altitude, over enemy territory, against an enemy with radar, with excellent aircraft, with skilled pilots defending their homeland. The Spitfire was not superior to the Bf-109 in all aspects, but combined with British radar, British tactics, British determination, it was enough. More than enough. We learned in 1940 what the Allies would learn in 1944. Air superiority cannot be achieved by courage and skill alone. It requires resources, tactics, and the right tools. Britain had all three, and the Spitfire was the perfect tool. After the Battle of Britain, the Spitfire continued to evolve. It served in North Africa against Rommel's Afrika Korps. The tropical conditions required modifications, Vaux air filters to prevent sand ingestion, additional engine cooling, desert survival equipment for pilots. Spitfire Mark Firsters arrived in North Africa in 1942. They faced a new opponent, the Focke-Wulf FW-190. Initially, the FW-190 outperformed the Mark V at most altitudes. German pilots regained some of the confidence they'd lost in 1940, but British engineers responded with the Spitfire Mark IX, more powerful Merlin 61 engine with two-stage supercharger, 1,565 horsepower, 400 mm top speed, superior altitude performance. The Mark IX restored the balance. Over Malta, Spitfires defended the island against relentless Axis bombing. The island was strategically critical, a base for attacks on Axis shipping to North Africa. From 1940 to 1942, Malta faced one of the most intense bombing campaigns of the war. Spitfires reinforced the island's defense. Flight Lieutenant Dennis Barnum, 601 Squadron, flew Mark V's from Malta in 1942. His combat report from April 23, 1942, showed the intensity. Morning patrol, 0630 hours. Intercepted raid of 20 Ju-88 bombers escorted by Bf-109s. Engaged the 109s to clear path for attacks on bombers. Shot down one 109 confirmed, pursued another, but he dove away towards Sicily. My Spitfire took hits from a third 109 I didn't see. Glycol leak, engine overheating, made it back to Hal Far airfield. Wheels up landing in a field, aircraft destroyed, but I walked away. In a replacement Spitfire that afternoon. Malta's defenders flew their Spitfires to destruction. Aircraft lasting more than a few weeks was rare, but reinforcements kept coming. Carriers like HMS Eagle and HMS Furious ferried Spitfires to the island. The aircraft would fly off the carriers when within range of Malta. It was a dangerous delivery method. Several aircraft were lost in transit, but it kept Malta supplied. The Spitfire's evolution accelerated as the war progressed. Mark VIII, Optimized for high-altitude operations, 400 pounds. Mark 9, the most produced variant, 5,665 built. Mark the Thien, low-altitude interceptor for countering FW-190 hit-and-run raids. Mark 14th, Griffon engine, 2,050 horsepower, 448 mph. This variant was fast enough to catch V-1 flying bombs. From June 1944, Spitfire 14th shot down hundreds of V-1s headed for London. The Mark 14th could reach 450 mph in level flight, fast enough to catch the 400 mph V-1. Pilots would fly alongside the V-1 and either shoot it down or tip its wing with their own wingtip, sending it off course into the Channel. Flight Lieutenant Raymond Baxter, 602 Squadron, became a V-1 specialist. His technique was refined through dozens of intercepts. You had to catch them over the Channel before they reached land. The Spitfire 14 could just barely catch them. Full throttle, slight dive. Get alongside, aim carefully. If you missed, they'd be gone. I shot down 11 V-1s in 3 weeks. Several others I tipped into the sea using the wing technique. Dangerous, you could lose control, but effective. The Spitfire served on the Eastern Front with Soviet forces. 1,131 Spitfires delivered to the USSR through 1945. The Soviets found them ill-suited to their needs, too delicate for rough Russian airfields, wing-mounted guns problematic. Soviet pilots preferred nose-mounted weapons. Mistaken identity issues. The Spitfire's silhouette resembled the Bf-109. Soviet Spitfires were often shot down by their own anti-aircraft guns. By late 1943, most Soviet Spitfires were withdrawn from frontline service. They served in secondary roles or were relegated to reserve units. The Soviets preferred their own fighters, LA-5s, Yak-9s, better suited to Russian conditions. But in Western Europe, the Spitfire remained supreme. It flew offensive sweeps over occupied France. It escorted bombers deep into Germany. It provided close air support for the D-Day landings. It hunted German jets in the war's final months. The Spitfire's last major combat role was against the Messerschmitt Me-262. Germany's first operational jet fighter entered service in 1944. With a top speed of 540 mph, it was far faster than any piston-engine fighter. Spitfire pilots couldn't catch Me-262s in level flight. But they learned the jet's weaknesses. Limited endurance, vulnerable during takeoff and landing. Slow acceleration at low speeds. Spitfires would patrol near-known Me-262 bases, wait for the jets to take off or land, attack when they were slow and vulnerable. Squadron leader Pierre Clostermann, a free French pilot flying Spitfires with RAF, described the tactic. The Me-262 was unbeatable in high-speed combat, but we didn't fight them at high speed. We waited near their airfields, caught them on approach when they were slow, gear down, shot down 3 Me-262s this way. The pilots never saw us. They were focused on landing. By the time they realized they were under attack, it was too late. This tactic infuriated German jet pilots. They called it unsportsmanlike. But it was effective. Dozens of Me-262s were destroyed, taking off or landing by Spitfires and other Allied fighters. The post-war years saw Spitfires continue in service. RAF photo reconnaissance Spitfires flew missions until 1954. The last RAF Spitfire flight was April 1, 1954, a PR-19 on a reconnaissance mission over Malaya. Searching for communist insurgents, the pilot reported excellent visibility, clear skies. A fitting end to the Spitfire's operational career. Foreign air forces operated Spitfires well into the 1950s. The Israeli Air Force used Spitfires in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The Egyptian Air Force also had Spitfires. Spitfires fought Spitfires over the Middle East. The Royal Indian Air Force operated Spitfire FR-18s until 1957. The Thai Air Force flew Spitfires until the early 1950s. The Irish Air Corps operated Spitfires as primary fighters until 1961, the last air force to retire them from combat service. In total, Spitfires served with air forces of 34 nations. They fought in every theatre of World War II. They shot down thousands of enemy aircraft. They saved countless lives by defending Britain, Malta, and other strategic locations. The production numbers tell the story of British industrial mobilization. 20,234 Spitfires built between 1936 and 1948. Castle Bromwich factory alone produced over 12,000. Supermarine factories produced the rest. Peak production, July 1944, with 485 Spitfires delivered. The final Spitfire, an F-24, rolled off the production line February 20, 1948. Serial number VN496. It never saw combat service. It was the end of an era, the last of Mitchell's masterpieces, the aircraft that had saved Britain from invasion. That had proven British industrial capability. That had become the symbol of resistance and victory. Today, approximately 60 Spitfires remain airworthy. They fly at air shows, commemorations, special events. The sight of a Spitfire in flight still draws crowds, the distinctive elliptical wings. The sound of the Merlin engine, the elegance and purpose combined. Modern pilots who fly restored Spitfires speak of the experience with reverence. Many describe it as the finest aircraft they've ever flown. Responsive, balanced, powerful. A thoroughbred racing machine that happens to have guns. The Spitfire changed how nations thought about air defense. It proved that quality aircraft, properly employed with good intelligence and tactics, could defeat superior numbers. It demonstrated the value of radar integration with fighter operations. It showed the importance of pilot rotation and rest. It validated the concept of centralized fighter control with decentralized execution. These lessons shaped air defense doctrine for decades. Modern air defense systems, AWACS, ground controllers, fighter interception, all trace concepts back to the Battle of Britain. The Spitfire also changed aircraft design philosophy. Its elliptical wing influenced post-war fighter designs. The emphasis on maneuverability over pure speed became doctrine. The integration of armor, armament, and performance found in the Spitfire became the standard. Even jet fighters, like the F-86 Sabre, showed Spitfire influence in their design philosophy. But perhaps the Spitfire's greatest legacy was psychological. It proved that innovation and determination could overcome military superiority. That an island nation could stand alone against a continent. That courage combined with technology could change history. German General Adolf Galland, reflecting on the Battle of Britain in post-war interviews, always returned to one theme. The Spitfire hadn't been the best aircraft of 1940 by every measure, but it had been the right aircraft for the mission Britain needed. And that, combined with British determination, had been enough. The last word belongs to Johnny Johnson, the highest-scoring British ace of World War II, with 38 confirmed victories, all of them flying Spitfires. The Spitfire was the best conventional defensive fighter of the war. It was responsive, maneuverable, beautiful to fly. It gave pilots confidence, and confidence in combat means everything. The Germans came to Britain expecting to crush the RAF in days. They found Spitfires waiting, and those Spitfires, flown by a few hundred young men, changed the course of history. The Germans laughed in June 1940, standing victorious in conquered Paris. Britain stood alone, isolated, apparently doomed. The Luftwaffe had destroyed every air force it encountered. There was no reason to believe the RAF would be different. But by October 1940, the laughter had stopped. The Bf 109 pilots who had dismissed the Spitfire as manageable had learned otherwise. The bomber crews who expected easy missions had faced relentless fighter attacks. The Luftwaffe commanders who predicted victory in days had watched defeat unfold over months. Germany's first major defeat of World War II came not from tanks or infantry. It came from 20,034 aircraft with elliptical wings, from skilled pilots fighting over their homeland, from radar and tactics and determination. The Spitfire didn't just defend Britain, it broke the myth of German invincibility. It proved that courage, skill, and the right tools could defeat numerical superiority. It showed that an island nation, standing alone, could survive. And it ensured that Britain would remain free to become the launching point for the liberation of Europe 4 years later. The Germans stopped laughing on September 15, 1940. They never started again, 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 never started again.